everyone. This is a girl, a guy, and a Buffy podcast, and I'm one of your co-hosts, Kate Balzer.
And I'm Charles Swint.
How are you doing today, Charles?
I am doing dandy.
Excellent.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Uh, it was a good day because I'm going to a cousin's wedding in a few weeks, and I found cute dress that was set, but I have found shoes to go with the dress, so I'm super that made my day.
That is an exciting day.
It
That's
is.
super exciting when you can find that. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm cleaning up. I'm trying to speaking of outfits, I'm trying to put together a cute outfit to wear this weekend because I'm going to go see Janet Jackson in concert. So,
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, you're gonna have so much
I'm so
fun.
excited about it. I can't wait.
Is
Um, s-
amazing.
so I have to figure out like a really cute outfit to wear. I'm still working on that.
Definitely.
Um,
I want pics. I want to see what you choose. Pixar
all the
didn't happen.
Pixar didn't happen. It's true, which is why I have pics nowhere because either
I know.
nothing ever happens
Yeah,
or there's a
exactly.
lot going on and I just don't want you to know about it.
Right. Right. Exactly. I feel like the characters in Buffy are very happy they did not grow up in the social media age too.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
we're happy about that.
I just, everyone's like, oh, post pictures everywhere. I'm like, you guys, the stuff that we did back in the day, I was like, no, they're the pictures that I do have. I'm like, I shouldn't even have these pictures. These are, so yeah,
Yeah.
none of
Speaking
that.
speaking of, childhood and teenhood, doing my little segue. Uh do you want to tell them what we're talking about today? Who we're talking about today? So again, remind what we're doing this season.
Yeah, so again, for all of those of you who are listening and joining us, for who are with us all the time, or if you're just joining us, we're a girl, a guy, and a Buffy podcast. We're a podcast that talks about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but we talk about the entire season as a whole. We are not a rewatch podcast. And so each season we pick a quote unquote big bad theme for our season, and we talk about that. And this season, our big bad is relationships. And so we're talking about all the relationships in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And in the first half of the season, we're going to be focusing specifically on the romantic relationships of each of the main characters in the show. And so last week we talked about Willow and the impact that her relationships had on television, and queer media. And today we are going to be talking about Xander, and we're going to be talking about Xander's relationships. And so the question that we're asking today is, what's your childhood trauma? So we're going to be exploring. We're going to give some sympathy to Xander. We're going to extend an olive branch and offer some grace and patience to Xander in this episode to sort of go a little bit deeper, because we do know that Xander's had a lot of trauma growing up in his life, and so we're going to explore how those things affected some of his relationships as he grew up during the show. And so, since we are talking about trauma, and since we will be talking about some of these things, we do want to give a trigger warning for anyone who might be dealing with all of those things, and we just want to make sure that you feel safe, supported, and comfortable.
Great. Yes. Yeah, if the topics that we talk about in this episode are not for you, we completely understand taking the week off and joining us for next week. Although, as we know, in the Buffyverse, relationships sort of equal trauma. So unfortunately, that may also be the sub theme of the season. But we decided to specifically focus on trauma and childhood trauma with Xander because it is such a predominant part of who he is, if you start to really look at him and break it down. So first, we're just going to kind of do our typical level setting and discuss trauma responses, and in particular, how it impacts childhood and brain development. Neither of us are experts in this. We know just enough to be dangerous.
Yes.
So, just kind of talking about it in an overall perspective of information that we've read from reliable sources online. I was first introduced sort of to the concept of ACE, which stands for adverse childhood experiences. And in different areas that work with children who've experienced trauma, you're given an ACE score, and the higher your score means the worse that traumas you experienced, or the more traumas you experienced as a child and teen, and then that can impact you in even greater ways down the road, both in your mental health and your physical health. So I was introduced to that concept in a previous job. I didn't work with it directly, but once I learned about it, I was very interested and did some additional reading. So when we started to decide what we were going to do, the focus of the episode for today and talking about Xander, this just like jumped out in my mind as we put the episode together. And so what they found is there is a big impact on children who experience trauma in childhood and teenhood. So I got this from NPR, and there's basically 3 types of adverse childhood experiences. And within those, there's different types of experiences that are broken down. So the first is there's abuse, which is physical, emotional, and sexual. There's neglect, which is physical and emotional. And then there's household dysfunction, which is mental illness, incarcerated relative, mother treated violently, substance abuse, and divorce. And so what they find is experiencing one or multiple of those traumas will impact brain development. And so it also impacts down the road, it impacts, ability to control emotions. It impacts, thinking, mental pathways. And so the more you have, obviously, the more adverse it can be. And this is the sort of generalization to understand the concept. Obviously, people respond in different ways, and some people are more resilient than others. And some people may have traumas in childhood, but they have positive role models around them to help them through it. So, all of that plays a factor into the situation.
Yeah, I would say too, like one of the other impacts of trauma when we're talking about that is also natural disasters. So if you happen to have been in a situation where an earthquake hit or a fire hit and your house burned down, or you're part of Hurricane Katrina or something like that, any one of those things, that is also a trauma event that occurs in your life, and so that also changes your outlook on things. It changes your neural pathways. Every time you experience a trauma event, it changes how your brain thinks about things, and so your neural pathways start to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I was reading another piece from Science Daily, and it took a look at the world's largest childhood trauma study, which information just came out this past year about it. And there was a quote from a Dr. Megan Klabund. I'm not sure if I'm saying her last name correctly, but she leads the Department of Psychology at the University of Essex, who did this study. And this quote really spoke to me about this, but specifically to discussion of Xander today. And the quote is, even when a child who has experienced trauma is not thinking about their traumatic experiences, their brains are struggling to process their sensations within their bodies. This influences how one thinks and feels about one's internal world, and this also influences one's ability to empathize and form relationships. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So should we dig into Xander and his trauma and his relationship?
I know, all of his trauma.
So I mean, just to lay out what we learned about him over the course of 7 seasons. So again, primarily we pull only from the show. Every once in a while we'll mention something from the comics, but basically we consider the show canon. And as we have said before, partly that's due to what Kate likes and does not like. And there's a lot of it do not like about seasons 8 through 12.
If Kate doesn't like it, it's not canon.
Right. That'll be our first t-shirt we get made. Well, second, after just the logo and the name of the show. When we have that audience that's like dying for merch. But so to lay out what we know about Xander is, we obviously know he has an alcoholic father. And so that falls under household dysfunction with substance abuse. We know he has a mother treated violently. As far as we know, it's only emotionally violently by his father. But again, that's another household dysfunction. We have inferred, don't you think, that Xander has experienced definitely emotional neglect?
I, he's definitely neglected. I think, yeah,
Yeah,
there's, I mean, when
if
we
not
talk about,
physical, but definitely emotional.
yeah, I mean, the fact that he, on Thanksgiving and during holidays, he chooses to camp outside and be outside
Yeah.
away from his family, I think all of them are neglected slightly,
Yes.
by their families, but I think Xander probably more so
Yes.
than the others for sure. Yeah.
Agreed. And then, I mean, you could probably, I don't think it's in text or even that much in subtext, but, it wouldn't be a surprise or it wouldn't be a giant leap to infer that there's emotional abuse as well.
I would say that the emotional abuse was there for sure. I mean, I don't think from what we see in Hell's Bells that it would be like a huge stretch to say that there might have been some physical abuse, but I would say that sort of cautiously because there's really no evidence of that. But we can see how Xander's father could get really drunk and possibly violent at some point and like throw a swing or push somebody or.
So obviously, Xander hits all three of the major areas of
Hmm.
having some type of adverse childhood experience. And I think the other implication is that's been happening since he was a little boy.
Yeah.
You know, I so I think in doing like, compare and contrast, Xander's had this going on longer, whereas Buffy, and we'll obviously delve into Buffy's relationships in a later episode, but just to, like I said, to compare and contrast, what we can understand for the most part, Buffy's life was fine until she hit 15. And then everything hit at once. It was the slaying, it was the divorce, which is a traumatic experience. And then it just grew from there. But
Right.
she had a lot of positive childhood experiences and I think a rather stable, loving family until that point.
Up until that point, yeah.
Right. And so that can like shed some light a bit on their different responses.
Yeah, and I think she maybe even says like to Holden, possibly maybe even a little bit before the slaying started, there were issues in the relationship, and that she
Right.
thinks her father cheated, and there were problems on both sides. So maybe like a little bit before, but like those primary functional years that from birth to maybe like 10, 12 or something like that,
Right.
13, it seemed pretty stable. Clearly those traumas and those things
Yes.
are affected, but compared
It
to
can
Xander, it seems.
right. It can just change the impact and the reactions and
Hmm.
how you manage those emotions and those experiences. Looking at Xander through that lens, for myself, I can only speak for myself. It definitely gives me much more sympathy and empathy for him. I don't think I've never been like a Xander hater. I've kind of gone up and down on how much like I love him or he drives me nuts or I think he's in the wrong. It kind of ebbs and flows sort of as I grow and how I see things in the world. But I definitely think currently I just see Xander as a kid who went through a lot. And so we're planning to discuss Buffy, Cordelia, Willow, Faith, and Anya. I mean, obviously, two of those relationships are truly romantic monogamy relationships, and that's Cordelia and Anya. But obviously, there's encounters with Buffy, Willow, and Faith that I think bear discussion, if for no other reason than all of his relationships, romantic relationships, or let me say this, not romantic relationships, romantic moments typically start from some sort of place of sex, particularly his two long-term relationships.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, and even all of them,
yeah,
every single one of them, and I think that's because it's like Xander's the horny teen boy, and that's like the trope of it all is that
correct.
that's how that starts, and I mean, I
But I
don't,
think, oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I don't know if that's the case for every boy in America that that's how their relationship starts. I wouldn't think so. I don't know. I mine was not a normal relationship, so I can't speak to that. Um,
Yeah, it definitely feels that Xander always felt very tropey 80s like comedy boy, that whole like the way boys behave,
Right.
the way he was written, certainly in the high school years. But what I was going to say is, yes, from a like TV writing, movie writing sort of perspective, that is definitely how I think it was written, how it comes off. Taking the step back and looking at it from the trauma response perspective, it's equating sex with love.
Right.
And jumping into a relationship through sex without building
And
love and friendship or any other foundation
right.
aside from sex, which, I think healthy adults, I'm not going to say whether or not that's feasible. A teenager who does not have a really healthy internal emotional sense, because of a lot of his traumatic experiences, maybe not so much. Maybe it's not a healthy place to start from, I think, as his relationship show.
I think teenage boys do tend to think are very much driven by the hormone and are like, oh my gosh, that that physical is kind of ever present, but I don't like,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean that they can't like take the time to build on a relationship. And I think like in a healthy way. And I think he tries to do that with Buffy. I think like he initially tries to do that with Buffy. He wants
Yeah.
to like take her out on a date and do all of this other stuff. So again, that sort of rejection of Buffy like turning him down could somewhere, and I think does in some cases, like builds a resentment, that comes lashing out in other ways when she starts dating Angel. There's a lot of like, especially early Xander, he makes a lot of, and I wish I could think of one right now off the top of my head, but he makes some really dark comments that shows you just how hurt he is
Yeah.
from being rejected about it, even though the situation has nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Like the things that he says, it clearly is like, I'm saying this because I feel hurt about, not being accepted by you or being rejected by you, I guess would be the
Right.
better way to say it.
Right. And I don't have a problem with the way he reacts initially to that, the way he goes and mopes and like listens to country music, like whatever, teens are going to do that. It's totally
Sure.
understandable. But it is that, like you said, that long term as things move down the road, as Buffy gets into other relationships, and gets into relationships with a vampire or other non fully quote unquote humans,
Hmm.
that in his mind, it makes it even worse.
Right. It feels like it's a rejection. Like you would rather choose this. And he says this, when he's talking about Spike, he's like,
Yeah.
you would rather, like, it's always, you would rather this thing
Right.
than me.
Right.
You're choosing something undead
Yeah.
that is evil over me. So
Yeah.
how does that make me feel?
And that's an example of him not empathizing. He never sees it from Buffy's perspective.
Right. Xander, it's not about you.
Yeah,
Like that's why.
exactly. And what it
Yeah.
might be, as someone with her strength and stamina,
Hmm.
to be in an intimate physical relationship with someone, she has to hold back just because like she might actually hurt them.
Right.
I mean, the show doesn't, it kind of gets into it in moments with Riley,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more in the like when they spar. But come on, like we can all interpret and extrapolate and be like, that obviously
They
applies to
knocked,
her.
she knocked
A
down
house
a
down.
building. A
Yeah.
building fell down because of what she and Spike did.
Exactly.
That's unrestrained. Like
Yeah.
that's Buffy unleashed.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
so yeah, so
Exactly.
I would imagine that yeah, she does have to hold back.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that that rejection, you've got the rejection from family, you've got this sort of rejection from Buffy that's
Hmm.
going on. And then when Cordelia is sort of and like introduced into all of this and she's also giving her negative quips and her like her barbs and like one liner after one liner after one liner, which is like, yep, this feel like it's no wonder that it worked because it's like, oh yeah, this feels right, this feels like what I deserve. Like I deserve to be treated this way by somebody because this is how I've always been done. And so looking for it in my relationship, this is exactly what I should get. So that's why, so it feels like that's why I'm attracted to her. It's because it's what I deserve.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've never thought of that, but yeah, I can absolutely see how that would be his interpretation.
And so then it's like, ooh, let's not, but I don't want to tell anybody about it.
Right. Well, I think it's one of those things like, we've been snipping at each other. My little friend group thinks you're the worst. You've been horrible to us, meaning Cordelia has been
Hmm.
horrible to Xander and Willow growing up. And yet, here's the hot, popular girl who's now physically attracted to me, even if it's against her, which she feels is her better judgment. I mean, it's so layered. I can 100% understand why they came together. I mean, plus the
Hmm.
actors had really good chemistry, but
Yeah. Yeah. And it works. I mean, and I think ultimately too, like it's not all trauma driven because I think there is
right.
something there.
Yes.
They really work. I think that storytelling was really good because I think it worked to get out of that like cycle of like
Yeah.
a of abuse. I mean, it's secrecy and abuse. And so when
Right.
you have when you have these like secret relationships, yeah, it's all, he says, oh, it's all hot, sexy in the broom closet and all of that stuff, which can be fun and exciting and things like that. But there's a lot of shame for both of them
Yeah.
behind it initially. And I think it's really nice to see them grow out of the shame
Mm-hmm.
of being together and recognizing that, you know what, that there is something special in both of us. And I really appreciate that. And I really love this about you. And I don't feel the need to feel shame to be with you anymore. Like I
Right.
want to be with you because of all the good things that I have seen going forward. So I think that's a first step of like changing behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was definitely positive outcomes from their relationship. I mean, think for Cordelia, it
Hmm.
forced her to step out of that snobby social hierarchy
Hmm.
mentality that she existed in high school and kind of grow as a person. I mean, I think interacting with the whole group and having those life and death experiences added to that, that then allowed for her character growth on Angel. And for Xander, I think it showed that, oh, somebody can like me,
Hmm.
romantically, somebody can support me. They obviously still had a lot of growth to do, but it was a good there was a good first step in that relationship in a
Yeah.
lot of ways.
Yeah. And for him to, to get someone who quote unquote had value
Yeah.
was like, oh, so then it flips that paradigm of like this is somebody who's been sort of abusive to me, verbally abusive to me, so that's what I deserve, to seeing Cordelia as the queen bee and being like, oh, just seeing potentially, oh, that is something that I deserve. I do deserve to be with someone who is this powerful, is this, amazing, because and they see that in me. So I think they're like we're like at least it's a step in the right direction
Yeah.
of changing behavior and doing some healing on that. And then he screws it all up.
Yeah. And then we come to his momentary fling with Willow.
Which is I hated this so much. In so many ways. I don't like it. I never like it. It's weird. It's crazy. It's, especially and again, it's written for drama's sake. It's written for the sake to
Yeah.
create drama because truly there is no real reason for them to like to go through this. I mean, I guess it happens, in relationships, and I mean, people do this. So,
Yeah.
um, I just hate that they did it to two couples that were so,
Yeah. I mean, it would have been more interesting in some ways for Cordelia and Xander just to break up naturally because high school's over and
yeah.
they weren't going to be a past high school relationship.
Hmm.
But again, it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Drama is the middle name.
Right.
Like,
Buffy,
how much
the
pain
drama.
can we inflict on couples is like the other thing it's known for besides the supernatural.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, all that being said, I mean, I totally get why you feel that way. I think the first time around, I was kind of hooked on it because it was such a shock.
Hmm.
at that point you were like, oh, Willow has a great boyfriend. She's totally moved on from her Xander crush. Xander finally has someone. He's seemingly moved on from his Buffy crush. And then all of a sudden they like see each other in formal wear and they're like, I must be kissing you now.
It's so WB. It's so like
It is.
teen drama, like, oh, we wear formal wear, and so therefore, you clean up real nice.
Yeah.
And I guess it allows you to see someone in a different light and in a different view, and you're like, oh, you are pretty, and there is this thing. So
Yeah.
I would have felt better about it, had it not been just like, oh, I put on a tux. Now you look like
Yeah.
James. Now you look like a swanky maitre d, and now I want to make out with you.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that, but at the same time, like they have trauma all the time. So why
Yeah,
would that one particular? I totally get what you're saying,
yeah,
I mean, I could definitely see that being the catalyst. I think with this, I never like when people cheat. I don't find that interesting. I mean, obviously people do in real life, but it's
right.
like one of my least favorite storylines. Although I didn't mind so much like Willow and Xander. Like if they ever had Buffy cheat, I would have been like, no. Just felt like that felt would have felt so out of character.
Hmm.
Um and I'm not saying that like I assumed that Willow and Xander would be cheaters, but I don't know, it didn't at the same time feel out of character.
It felt well. That's the thing. It felt to me. It felt out of character. It felt very out of character for like Willow, who is such a rule follower, to do something like this, and Xander, who had not paid attention to Willow at all and knew that she liked him. He knows that she has a crush on him and that she likes him, but put her in the friend zone. And that's so it feels very much out of character for them to do that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but like to me that circles back around to like the heightened feelings of it being secret. And I think,
Yeah.
there's a sense of like I think they just saw each other in a different way. I mean, I even think I'm not even sure how much like Willow actually had romantic feelings for Xander as that was like the guy in her life. And I'm
Hmm.
not trying to like take her agency away from her. It's just I'm not sure she knew. Like she was
Hmm.
saying it was that, but maybe it wasn't. It was just like, oh, here's this guy I've grown up with. Like I feel like I don't know any other guys. I've never like noticed other guys, so I'm gonna be, attracted to him. But I think as
Yeah.
time wore on, I don't know that was necessarily the case in that moment. And then I just think they saw each other in a new light and feelings come up, whatever, even if the feelings are just fleeting. So it worked for me. I mean, like it made sense. I'm not saying they had to do it, but it made sense. And
Hmm.
then I think once they started the like secrecy of it, kind of the way his relationship with Cordelia started, that heightened it gave it those heightened feelings. And I think even though Willow is such a rule follower, I think there are those moments where sometimes the biggest rule followers, when they can get away with breaking it, is so satisfying. And
Yeah.
I feel like Willow's one of those people. And I think Xander was just like, he really just noticed Willow for the first time as a girl, as like in a romantic way.
Yes. Yeah. I can see that. I can see that point of view for
Yeah. I
sure.
mean, it's not a hill I'm going to die on.
Sure. Um, I
But
just won't. Yeah. I've never liked it. I've never
yeah,
liked it.
yeah.
But again, like sort of these inappropriate behaviors and things like that, that can also come out of from trauma. Going back to the question and going back to your childhood trauma, even though it's something that they may not have been like consciously thinking about, somehow this behavior, shows up and allows this thing to occur because they're not really thinking about it, but it's really a symptom of a bigger issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely can be a sense of self-sabotaging, particularly when things are going well,
Hmm.
which is where they are in that moment. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you could argue the case for that. I mean, I agree. I think it would be subconscious.
Yeah.
But that can be a behavior that comes out of trauma response.
Yeah. And then we get to on. Well, I mean,
No,
I guess we have to say Faith.
I think we
You
need to do faith.
you want to have you
Well, I mean, come on, it's like a big moment
he
in his
loses
like
he loses
it's
his
not
virginity to
right.
her. It is a very extreme sort of sexual assault sort of situation. you know.
I don't know if I would argue that that time they actually sleep together is a sexual assault. I mean, she's very like, hey, come on with me, like, I
I
mean,
would
just
say
because.
the part where she chokes him out
Yeah, but that's
is,
later. That's not
yeah,
that same night. That's like a couple episodes down when she's really turned bad and they know it.
right.
I mean, that's different. I'm not talking about that
Yeah.
moment. I'm talking about literally when she pulls him into the room during the Zeppo and they have sex. And it wouldn't be even, it's not even like a big deal if they engage in a one night stand. Fine, whatever. Like that's their choice to do. It's more the fact that he knows that, but I don't know if that was ever like his intention. Even though he knows it was a one night, he still thinks just because he had sex with Faith, they have a little bit of a connection, which obviously leads him to that moment in, is it Enemies,
I
Bad
think so.
Girls? I can't ever remember. Enemies, I think, where he thinks he can talk to her. And even Buffy's like, dude, just because she has sex with a guy does not mean that there's a connection.
Right.
You're not going to get through to her. And she was right.
My thought on it is that first time too is again, Faith is going for her want,
Yep.
take, have thing, and that's what she
Yeah.
wanted at that moment.
Right.
There was this big fight. She gets riled up after a fight, so she wants to blow off a little steam. You're there. He doesn't, I mean, again, he doesn't say no to it, but he never really says yes to it either. He's kind of like, Faith, we shouldn't, or like, because he kind of is questioning the whole thing from the beginning in that initial conversation. And then when she throws him down and they go at it, then he just kind of like he lets it happen. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's go. So but there's never any sort of like, at least it doesn't appear to me that there's ever really like a conscious choice that he's like, oh yeah, I really want to do this with you. Maybe, and again, maybe in a subconscious way he would be cool with sleeping with Faith, but he's never, but I don't know if he ever thought about it in this context or when it, I'm sure he's thought about having sex with Faith many times,
Yes.
many times, but I think there's a difference between fantasizing about something and then when it actually happens
Yeah.
and what that means, especially if you are a victim of trauma. And sometimes when those things happen, you're like, it feels very much like here's your fight, flight, freeze situation where he's in a situation where it's like, I think I wanted this, but maybe I'm not sure. And should I be doing this? And so it's like, do I run? Do I stay? What? And then it feels like he just freezes in that moment and then just allows it to happen. And then she's done and she's like, great, get out. And then
Mhm.
immediately kicks him out. So it's not like the moment is not about him. And so I don't think he ever gets a choice in that situation, which is why I, coin it as form of abuse because he like I don't think he ever has any sort of like I mean, yeah, he does it and he like goes through with it and has sex and he's not like
Yeah.
I don't know if he regrets it or not, but
Yeah, I mean that's the area where it's like hard because the text is one way and the
again, it's also
some
played for laughs too. Like it's
played for last, but sometimes it's easy to find the subtext or the implication from the text.
mhm,
Other times I think it's because of how they were writing it, what they were thinking,
mhm.
it's less clear, but I can definitely see how it would be dubious consent for sure
Yeah.
in
I,
that moment.
I'm sure when they were writing it, they were probably like, this is Xander's night. He gets to be the hero.
Right.
And
Right.
so, like, the cherry on top of him beating the bad guys is that he
Yes.
gets to lose his cherry,
Yeah. Papa's cherry. Yeah.
pop his cherry, with a Slayer, with Faith, with the bad
Right.
girl, and that's great. And that's, his hero's reward after beating the bad guy is that. I think that's a writer's sort of, I don't know what
Yeah.
that
No,
says.
I no, I agree. I think that's fully the intention of how they wrote it. And I agree that looking back now, we look at that moment as much different. Or we can look at it much different and not just see it as
Right,
like the
right,
conquering hero or this is so funny or he finally got his moment with a Slayer, even if it's not Buffy, but he got it with like the hot, sexy chick. Not to mention the fact that like Faith has all her own traumas and how she uses
right,
sex as a traumatic response. So like there's trauma on top of trauma happening in that moment or responses to trauma.
right.
So it's yeah, it's interesting.
I do like that term dubious consent, where it's not it's definitely great,
Yeah.
and it's really only up to the people who were involved in the situation that can really determine that, because only that person, like only Xander can answer that question.
Right.
Really,
Right.
like we're all just sort of projecting our own insecurities, our own thoughts
Yes.
and stuff onto that moment, but he's the only one who can really be like, yeah, I wasn't really okay with that, or like, oh yeah, that was the coolest night of my life, and I
Yeah.
will cherish that moment forever.
Right, exactly. And that's totally what I was trying to get at too. That's a great way to summarize the experience with Faith. So moving on to the
Anya
and
Emanuelle Jenkins,
yes, exactly.
born on the 4th of July, our little
Yes.
patriot.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I want to, before we even delve into the relationship, I was thinking about this and what I wanted to say. I almost feel like we need to level set with their relationship and say that in addition to whatever comes up in their relationship, part of the problem for their relationship is how, and we've said this before in previous episodes, how Anya's character is so inconsistent
Yes.
and they
Yeah.
didn't know what they wanted her to be. And so she was like, my go-to analogy is like she's like tofu. You know, they make her the flavor they need her to be for that
Right.
season or that moment. And I'm not saying that obviously characters can't grow, can't be inconsistent because humans are inconsistent, but they do it in a way that just doesn't even feel like a character journey. It just feels like
Plot device.
plot device. Exactly. Thank you. That's the word. Yes. So that to me plays into some of the problems in the relationship too, because she's so like, who is she supposed to be?
Right, right. And there is, in that list of like 10 things that does come up that I do think about with Anya, especially early days with Anya, is like changing them into being the person that you want them to be.
Yes.
Right, because she comes at him very much like, hey, okay, so I don't know, I'm trapped in this human body, I'm having all these feelings, do you want to go to the prom with me?
Yeah.
And they do that, and so then again, her thing is like, okay, well then we're dating now.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's not how this works. And then let me explain to you how this works. And so there's a lot of him sort of guiding, and I wouldn't say manipulating, but like guiding her along of like, this is what our relationship should look like, because he's always very much like leading that relationship and sort of setting the tone and the course of their relationship.
Yes. And leading and guiding her in a way that he is lacking the tools and good examples to be
Hmm
doing so, which is
yes.
also part of the problem.
Right. Like that moment when she's like, where she blows up at him about like, well, you're always saying that I do
Right.
this and I do this, and what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, and there is nothing wrong with Anya. That's just who she is. Once the writers figure out who she
Right.
is, this is who she is. And so either you love her for that or you don't, but you don't try
Yeah.
to change her. But I think he's
Yes.
always, but there's like, especially early on, there's a lot of like, let me change you to fit my narrative or to
Yeah.
sort of teach you how to be a human girlfriend,
Right.
which has always been a little weird for me. But, again,
Yeah.
played for the humor, played for the like comedy of it all, and also to
Right.
give Xander like, I'm a man now and I can have sex, and we're gonna make all
Yeah.
these like sex jokes. And now I have, a girl who's just like, we will have sex now.
Yeah.
And now I'm just gonna take off my clothes, which is like, quote unquote, straight man's fantasy, where a woman's just gonna be like, I
Yes.
want to have sex with you right now. Let me take off my clothes. Again, so weird and like, and I guess they use that as a moment to make Xander look like a good guy and be like, no, we're not gonna do that. Although they end up having sex, I think, anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's the end of the episode where she and Harmony and Buffy are walking because they've had sad relationship moments. It's
Yes.
where, yeah, I think with, well, kind of like with Xander and Cordelia, Anya and Xander's relationship basically starts with sex. I
Hmm.
mean, they went to the prom together, but that's basically it. And then they jump into bed together. And then after like she freaks out about it, she's like decides she does want a relationship. They kind of fall into a relationship, but there's never that conversation between them
Hmm.
that you sometimes need at a certain point. Just where is this, relationship going? Or even just to have like conversations in general about each other. I mean, it never felt like he was learning about her and she was learning about him.
Right. I think she asked fairly early on. She does say, well, where is this relationship going?
That's
And
true. That's
she was
true.
like, so, because then she goes through like all the steps of like what a relationship should be and all this other
Right.
stuff. And he's like, whoa, this is way too early. Let's start with a movie or something like that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just, it's a weird, it is tricky. This one is a little bit trickier for me because in the beginning, she is just so inconsistent and she's so like, she's a little all over the place until
Yeah.
we get really into like season 5, where I feel like we really kind of have a better bead on
Yeah.
Anya.
Yeah, I would agree. There's more. I never think I don't think she is ever fully developed correctly, but it does get better in season 5.
Yeah.
What I was going to say, the other side of their relationship that I think is one of the reasons they end up having problems when they first get together. I mean, he's an 18-year-old high school graduate. She is, let's assume when she became a demon, she was in her like early 20s. So
hmm
she's a few years older than him anyway. I mean, not inappropriately older than him. I'm just saying, I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. Like she
hmm
could be older, but I'm just going to say, like, based on, I mean, technically, I guess she could be younger based on when like she was born and how much younger people like got married. But assume she's somewhere between like 16 to early, 20s, like 22
hmm
is what I was thinking. Just, because we don't have that information. So assuming she's when she was human and turned to demon, that's
hmm
like the human age she was.
Right.
So again, like age appropriate for Xander. I mean, I don't think she's 16, but that's
Well,
partly because of, wait. That's partly because of the actress. But all that to say, then she lives for 1100 years as a demon. And it's not her choice to not be a demon anymore. It's taken away from her. So that's like a traumatic experience. She's got to figure it out. All this time has gone by. And as we kind of learn throughout the years, so that's why when we have these like, meta-analysis discussions, it's a little easier because you've seen the whole thing. So we know all the pieces
hmm
that she was only about the vengeance. Like Hallie even says, like, girl, get a life. Like,
Right.
and she's like, I just live for doing, vengeance. So she's starting from this place that is lacking in human understanding, meaning
hmm
the human experience
Sure.
understanding,
Yeah, yeah.
and those emotions, and that's never like talked about. And obviously we could also delve into in a whole episode the hypocrisy about how they treat Anya versus Spike, in the fact that like she obviously had to have killed more people,
Oh yeah. She
um,
killed way
you
more
know,
people than
than
Spike.
Spike for being a demon for 1100 years and actually starting like the Russian Revolution. That alone. So, there's that whole element too that is underlying the relationship, but is never really brought to text in the show.
Yeah. Yeah. They, again, only very early on does she
Yeah.
mention sort of this is where I'm coming from, because now I was gonna make a point that about what we say about Angel and Buffy, but then after I thought about it, it doesn't quite hold water, but it is still kind of a parallel too. So what you're saying about the age thing is that no matter what, like when we go back to the flashback, when we see where she first becomes a vengeance demon, we don't know how old she is at that time. She lives as a demon for 1100 years. Now the body that she's in and the person that she is not at that age is a teenager, because she
Right.
is stuck in like, because she says, I'm stuck in the guise of this teenage body. So now I am a teenager, even though my mind has is 1100 years old, or probably a little bit older than that, you know,
Yeah.
1100 and some change. So I think that, so yeah, that was kind of the point. But I would agree with everything else that you said. I had that moment of, oh wait, we never really get on Anya about that, but
Yeah. Well, so like all of that to say that weirdly, like they're in the same place and yet they're in very different places because of her, not only her how long she's lived for, but how long she's lived for with sort of a different mindset, being a
yeah.
demon,
hmm
and being her particular type of demon. I'm not applying that to all
Right.
demons necessarily across the Buffyverse, but in that particular case.
Kate is not a
And
demonist. Thank you very much.
yes, and then on top of that, that she was always about vengeance against men because that's how
Hmm.
she started. So, that's a weird place to start a relationship from. I'm actually like blown away that the two of them got as far as they did, and not at all surprised that they didn't get married.
Right. Well, and it's very much fighting the things of everything that she's done
Yeah.
and seen of men, but still having these feelings,
Hmm.
which she does express a lot, especially when like during, as they're getting closer to the wedding, and she's like, I can't, I have contempt for the whole forebodingness lot of them. And she has this thing of I don't like men and but I have these feelings and you are not unattractive and you were nice to me and the sex is good, so why not? As opposed to ever trying to go out and she never tries to go out and date anybody. Well, maybe I think maybe initially she's tried to ask other people out before the prom, but didn't really like any of the guys that she was talking to before the prom. But I think that's a subtext thing that I might have
Yeah, I was
filled
gonna say I
in.
don't remember that being.
I think it's just like in the conversation that she initially has with him to ask him out,
Gotcha.
it seems implied that she has at least asked out other guys or has tried to talk to other teenagers
Yeah.
and doesn't like them because they're stupid and insipid and he's actually not half bad.
Yeah. Okay, I have to say, one of the Xander Ani moments that I like the least, and it's partly in context with the rest of the episode, but it's his speech to her at Into the Woods. It's beautiful, and Nicholas Brennan delivers it incredibly well. But I think it just pisses me off because again, I feel like they never really it never felt like they had real conversations with each other. Like we
Mhm.
always just saw him trying to be like him being embarrassed by her and trying to like control her behavior due to that embarrassment, and then her being, saying crazy things
Mhm.
or things that, people around her found inappropriate. I'm not saying that. I'm just the interpretation of what she would say, and her basically her fish out of water kind of like awkward
Right.
place that she played in the group dynamics. And then all of a sudden we get this like beautiful, sweet, romantic speech to her. And I was like, no. Particularly after the what he says to Buffy about why she should chase after Riley,
Mhm.
and like how he gets on Buffy as if it was like her fault the whole thing went down.
Right.
It just takes me and I'm like, this is not deserved. Their relationship does not deserve this. Xander does not deserve to give such a nice speech. I'm
And I
just
guess they're reaching for ways to again, I think they reach for ways to make him a good guy. They give him moments to make him like a really good person to really remind us like to center us back to like, oh, this is why we love Xander because
yes,
of these
agreed.
like fleeting moments
Yes.
of of these speeches that he goes
Yeah.
to Anya, to Dawn, to like
Yeah.
to the potentials where he's like he has his moments for sure where you're like,
Yes.
now can you be that guy all the time
Right.
or at least more so because
Yes.
it's because he's like the jokester and he's and that's his role is like
Right.
that's where he feels comfortable is being the class clown.
Yeah. I mean, I think Xander does grow up over time. He just has the least character development, between certainly
Hmm.
between him, Buffy, and Willow.
And then just to sort of bring it all
Circle
back
back.
to the trauma of it all and then like him leaving Anya at the altar is like the
Yeah.
ultimate like that's like the
Yeah.
pinnacle of it all and you see it and even though she's like, it was a demon, he was tricking you, like none of that you saw was real, he still chooses to run away because he's like, because I can't believe that any of this will really happen. Like that because of what I know, I don't have a blueprint for what happy ever after looks like.
Yes.
And so I can't promise you that. I can't give you that. And so, which is fair, which is a fair thing to feel and a
Hmm.
fair thing to like acknowledge about yourself. And again, that's growth. It's that is a very healthy thing to be like, you know what? This is why I feel this way. This is why I'm scared because I don't have a blueprint. I don't know. Look at this. Like, this is what I grew up in. and I don't want to spend a life like that with you. Tell me that before the day of the wedding. I
Yeah.
need you to tell me that before we are like walking down the aisle. But buddy, this is a conversation. Like again, this is what a healthy
Yeah.
relationship looks like. You should have that conversation super early on. Also, I mean, she spent a lot of time over there. She knew that a lot of that was going on. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I feel like that's one of those things where him leaving her at the altar for that reason feels it just feels shitty because it's not like it's a it's a fine reason, but it's a reason that you already knew. And I don't know. I think it's weird that you spent all this time sitting on this. Again, it's done for drama's sake, but you've been sitting on this for a while now. Like,
Oh, that part felt very real to me. Like that does not surprise me. I've known people in real life that did that. They went in knowing they probably shouldn't marry this person and they did. And it didn't work out, but they stayed way longer than they probably should have
mm,
in the marriage. So that felt like normal. That felt like realistic to me. Especially since they don't have any adults in their lives to show them both healthy relationships, adult healthy relationships, and to help guide them. I mean,
right,
and then you're, factor in that the horrible year of season 6, meaning like they all
right.
go through like the worst stuff. They're really struggling in kind of the real life part of life in season 6 as it's written. So I think the other thing of it too, which is the fact that he asked her and when he asked her and how he asked her, looking at it now, like as a response to trauma. I mean, it
Hmm.
was like a sweet moment, but neither of them were in a place to get married, both
Sure.
emotionally, age wise, like, so that all is part of that too.
Right.
The way he did it, like you said, was horrible, but in the end, it probably was the right thing to do.
I mean, maybe it was,
um,
um,
but not the way he did it. Yes, he should have spoken up sooner. But I think that demon just gave him the excuse
right.
in the
And
moment.
and even what you just said too about like how he proposed to her, and she even says like you're just doing this because you
Yeah,
think we're gonna die. Perhaps that there's some truth in that, is that you're doing this because you want to make this huge grand gesture, because
yeah,
you think you should,
yep,
because you don't think we're like there's a part of you that doesn't think that we're gonna make it. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. I think there's probably a lot more truth in that than him being like, I'm saying it because I do think we're gonna make it. Well, and
yeah.
again, you're saying that to be super comforting, but chances are y'all might not have made it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think I mean, yeah, I think he thought he was doing it because he thought it was the thing to do. And again, I think it's also just, that sense of like I want to hold on to this person because it's someone in my life that I have feelings for, I feel about it, and
And
I don't
then
know
you
how to.
sit, and again, you sit on the engagement for like months and months. I mean, I know Buffy died and all of that stuff, but I guess it's excuse. Well, Buffy died, and then we were trying to do the spell and all this stuff. But that was like, and then Buffy came back, and all. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
sitting on
there
that
could have
for,
there could have been a time where he could have shared that news
yeah,
during the summer, even while they were trying to figure out. I mean, it didn't have to be a big celebration. He could have asked Anya to be like, "Let's quietly share with our friends."
yeah.
Um, you
Let's
know,
just have a conversation with our friends and let
but
them
again, I
know.
think it's
Yeah.
more of a sign of how much he didn't actually really want to get married.
Right. That you
Be-
sat on it for like what, 3 or 4, like 5 or 6 months?
yeah. I think the flip side of what that situation shows is how much Anya never was really, other than that brief period after losing her powers before she started dating Xander, she was never really alone. She had never time to
Hmm.
figure out who she is
Yeah.
without jumping into a relationship. And that was also part of it. So that when they were getting married, I mean, she became obsessed
Yeah.
in a way that just felt like it was unhealthy because it was defining who she was, and
Hmm.
she didn't know who she was, and she thought this is what you do, and all the things we've sort of already said before, really, like we said, culminated in the wedding
Right.
preparation, the engagement, the wedding preparation, and then the wedding that didn't happen,
Right.
which is sad because I do think, I definitely think they loved each other. They just had a lot of stuff they needed to figure out.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the way their relationship formed and how it
yeah,
developed just never
yeah,
there was never really enough to stand on other than,
yes,
the big romantic gesture that we thought was that, oh, he really does care about her when during Hush when like
yes,
he thinks Spike has bitten her and then he goes all crazy and it's like, oh, that's the thing that you're like, oh, you really do care. And then they're like, okay, well, let's go back. You do care. Here's this like show of like heroism or whatever. Now let's go back and have sex is the immediate, again, my hero. And then your reward is sex.
yes.
He's like a Pavlov. I felt
Pavlov's
like he was,
dog.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was with her just for the sex.
So what do you think about the fact that they hooked back up one more time in
Twice more.
oh well, twice more in season 7?
I think it's fine. I don't mind it at all. I think it's
Yeah. Kind of
that
like end of the world sex. Why not?
and, and then like the second time they do it, like the first time it's like, oh, we had a conversation
Yeah.
about things, and so now we're like in an emotionally vulnerable place, and like here we are, and then it's the wrap up sex, and then the second time was just like, well, everyone else is doing it.
Right.
Why not? Let's do it too.
And you want to be like, if everybody else jumps off a bridge.
Then yes. If this is the bridge that I'm jumping off of, then yes. I'm jumping off of it and jumping on. Jumping on
Yeah.
top of Xander. Yeah, it's weird. That scene is weird because where is everybody else? That's the question. Is like,
Well, so
where are all the
Faith,
other but where are all the
all the other
potentials?
potentials.
Like, are they in the basement? Are they like
I guess they're all piled up in Dawn's room. I don't
are they
know.
in Dawn's room? Are they over at Xander's place? I don't know what's happening.
No, I think they're all like in the living room
But
and
then they're on the kitchen floor. What if somebody comes in for some cereal or something?
okay,
Like,
stop trying to put logic on
I
this
know it's
scene.
just weird. It's just weird. I watched that scene the other day and
It is weird.
I was like, where is? I was like, okay,
They
they're
could have just
there, they're there.
I know.
Where's everybody else? Because literally, like 2 scenes ago, the house was full of people.
I know. What they should have found an abandoned house that they kicked Buffy out to.
Yeah, ugh, it's so weird. Yeah,
That'll
it's
be
bizarre.
that'll be like maybe that'll be our Friends episode. We discuss the end of Empty Places.
Oh my goodness.
Any
So,
final thoughts on Xander, his drama, his relationships?
uh, you know, again, I think, giving a little bit of empathy and
Yeah.
compassion to Xander and all those things. I
I
think
mean
there's
he
some catharsis in all of that.
yeah. I think he does care for, love, depending on who the woman is that he's in a relationship with, minus Faith. Only because they just didn't get there.
Yeah.
That was not the point of their relationship. I mean, he certainly loves Willow and Buffy, not romantically. We would love to hear what you all think about Xander, and do you see him from this perspective now? Has your perspective on him changed over the years? So you can definitely hit us up on Instagram and Facebook at a Buffy podcast, or you can email us at a Buffy podcast at gmail.com.
All right. And we will see you all next time.
Thanks so much.
Bye.